The sponsor of this episode is Skillshare.
Hi, I'm Konstantin Baum, Master of Wine, and like I just said, I'm a Master of Wine. This should mean that I know a lot about wine in general, but I really only know a lot about wine made from grapes. There is a lake or even a whole sea of wines made from other plant-based material, and I want to explore these wines to find out what they have to offer. Ready, set, go. Wine in most legislations has to be an alcoholic beverage made from fermented grape juice, but fruit wine can be made from all sorts of different things. They are amongst the oldest alcoholic beverages, and they might even be older than wine made from grapes, but it's difficult to say. The big advantages of grapes are that they grow in large volumes in a vineyard and that they contain a lot of sugar and therefore ferment readily, but grapes don't grow everywhere, so people got creative in order to produce wine. The most well-known Western fruit wine is cider made from apples, but you can also make wine from bananas, pineapples, cherries, or even dandelions. And there's mead made from honey. I've picked some high quality examples of fruit and flower wines in order to find out whether they can be as tasty as grape wine. So without much further ado, let's go tasting. The first bottle is not a wine, it's the von Wiesen, Verveda and Quince, and it's an alcohol-free carbonated fruit juice drink. Sexy category name, huh? The basis of this drink is actually celeriac juice that underwent malolactic conversion. They also use quince, which is a fruit that you can't really eat on its own, but it's often used for jam or jelly production. And they also use verbena, which is often used in tea, but this is just an aromatic compound to give this drink more complexity. There's no alcoholic fermentation, so there's no need to remove any alcohol, but they've added CO2 to give this wine fizz. It sparkles just like a sparkling wine would, but the color is quite golden, so it doesn't really look like a sparkling wine, and it smells very intense. It smells quite a bit of quince. Quince has this intense flavor that reminds me quite a bit of apple or pear. It also has a flavor of verbena, so that comes through quite nicely. It just underlines the quince flavor. It's not dominating, but it's quite nice because it adds complexity to the wine. On the palate, it's quite juicy and intense. It has 24 grams of sugar per liter, so it's not super sweet, and it's less sweet than most alcohol-free wines would be, but it has good freshness as well, so there's a great balance there. It's actually a really enjoyable drink. Something for summer if you don't want to drink alcohol. I would recommend this. On the 100-point scale, I rate this 84 points. It's really good. It's enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. I like it. Next up, we have the first real wine with alcohol in it. It's the Kystin Cuvee 17, I think that is, from Brittany in France, and it retails for 12 euros. Like I said earlier, apple cider is probably the most well-known fruit wine. It's very common in northern France, but it's being produced all around the world. In the production of cider, different kinds of apples are being used, not the ones that we can buy in the supermarket. They use 16 different old types of apples in this wine, and they've also used the famous, apparently, Marroni de Redon chestnuts that are being macerated in the wine. The wine is then fermented in stainless steel, and out comes this cider. I'm pretty sure this is my first Marroni cider, so I'm excited to see what it tastes like. So this has a really dark golden color. It's almost orange, I would say. It's quite frothy, so there's quite a lot of CO2, and you can also see the bubbles, the froth staying on top of the wine for quite a long time. It smells of apples, but not really fresh apples, more like bruised apples. There's also quite a lot of nuttiness here, but would I actually identify these as Marronis, as chestnuts? I'm not really sure. It smells almost a little bit dusty in my opinion. On the palate, it's actually very rich and concentrated. It says that it's only 9 grams per liter of sugar, but it feels like a lot more. For me, it's quite juicy, quite intense. The alcohol is at 4%, so it's lower than most beers would be, and it's quite an experience. I don't know what to say about the wine. I think it's a bit of an acquired taste. It's quite special, but I think it would work with quite a lot of food really well. I can see this with goat cheese, for example, as a great match, but yeah, it's a bit weird, a bit funky. But due to its intensity and complexity, I have to rate it a little bit higher than the previous one. I would say this is an 87-point cider, not wine. And It's definitely something worth trying. Next up, we have the 2020 Eric Bordelet Poire Granite, which is a pear-based sparkling wine from Normandy in France, and it retails for $17. Eric Bordelet worked as a sommelier in a 3-star Michelin restaurant in Paris. He studied enology in Bonn and then decided that he wanted to make cider at the same quality level with the same quality standards as great wine. As the name would suggest, this is actually from old pear trees that grow on granitic soil, and they use 20 different really small pears in order to produce this aromatic pear sparkling wine. This has actually 6% of alcohol, it is off-dry and it ferments spontaneously like many great wines would. But the big question is, does it taste like a great wine? Let's find out. This smells very intense of pears. I can really imagine how they used these tiny pears because you get so much concentration on the nose. On the palate though, it's a bit bitter and a little bit harsh. I don't know, it feels like it's slightly out of balance. In my opinion, this bitterness doesn't really work in this wine style. I rate this wine 82 points. I find it a bit unfortunate that this bitterness is so pronounced. Otherwise, I would have rated it a lot higher, but yeah, it just can't go much higher than 82. Next up, we have the 2015 cold hand wine Rheum, rhubarb-based sparkling wine from Denmark, which retails for $36. So this is a rhubarb-based sparkling wine made with the traditional method, and the rhubarb type is called Svendborg Vinrababa, whatever. And the interesting thing is that it's 2015, so it's already 7 years old, and the oldest fruit wine so far, so I'm excited to taste this. The rhubarb is sourced from organic farmers in Denmark. They press it in an old cider press and then chaptalize the mash, so they add some sugar in order to kick off fermentation. The fermentation takes place spontaneously, and then there's a second fermentation in bottle, and they leave the wine in the bottle for 6 months on the lees before disgorging it. So this sounds like a fairly serious sparkling wine. I don't know whether you can see it, but they actually printed their logo, the cold hand, on the inside of the label, so you can see it through the wine, which is a pretty nice touch, I think. On the nose, it's super interesting. It actually smells of rhubarb, obviously, but there's also a little bit of soy sauce coming through, quite complex. There are also yeasty notes swimming in there, so it is a very interesting, complex flavor profile. On the palate, it actually has the right balance. There's some bitterness and quite a bit of acidity coming through from the rhubarb, but there's also a little bit of sweetness rounding it up, so it feels quite complete, well balanced, long, refreshing, vibrant. This is really, really good. I should also add that the wine has 9% alcohol, so it's higher than for all of the other ones that we've tasted so far. And the alcohol obviously gives the wine a little bit more texture, a little bit more roundness on the palate, but it also carries more flavor. So I think the alcohol really helps the wine to shine, but this is really well made. I also need to add that this wine still feels really young. I would rate it 90 points. This is really great stuff and a really exciting experience. Here we have the XVII Winery 1785 Birch sap sparkling wine from Sweden, which retails for around $20 and sounds pretty interesting. The birch tree sap is collected by drilling a hole into the tree at the end of winter, beginning of spring, when the juices start flowing again, and it's well known in Nordic countries as a cosmetic product, as a drink, but also for producing syrups and alcoholic beverages. The birch tree sap is fermented in stainless steel. Before fermentation ends, they add sugar and yeast and then ferment it again in bottle. It's been disgorged after a few weeks. They don't add any sulfites during the winemaking process, and they call this méthode suédoise. So are you interested in tasting this? Because I am. I've actually never tasted birch tree sap, so I don't really know what to expect, but that's what life is for, right? Making new experiences. First of all, this is quite light in color. It looks much lighter than most wines that we've tasted so far. Wow, this is super interesting. It smells of marzipan, lemon, a little bit of green apples, nutty. Wow, birch sap. What the hell? I was told that this has 19 grams of residual sugar, but it feels quite a bit lower than that. It has 11.5% of alcohol. And it's really grippy and textured and refreshing and vibrant. There's a lot going on there. This is really awesome. I do like this quite a bit. It's so delicate, but yet so complex. So I would rate this 92 points. It's really good stuff.
As you can see, I love making new experiences and learning new things, and this is why I'm happy to introduce the sponsor of this episode, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of different courses and members all across the world. It is easy to use and offers a vast range of classes from animation to web development and even wine. I always want to improve my own abilities, and I like to learn at my own pace from experienced instructors. For example, I wanted to improve my cocktail mixing skills, so I checked out the class by Ivy Mix, who owns a cocktail bar in Brooklyn and was named American Bartender of the Year. So after this video, I might mix a cocktail with some of the fruit wines. Let's see. Skillshare is entirely ad-free and there are new classes launched each week. They come with subtitles in Spanish, French, Portuguese and German, which are not filled with typos like the subtitles here on this channel. Below this video, you'll find a link that will give you access to a 1-month free trial on Skillshare, so check that out. And now back to the fruit wines.
Next up we have the Bulle de Roche Linden Flower Hydromel, which is basically a mead, and it retails for $15 US. Mead or wine based on honey is made by mixing water and honey in order to ferment it. Honey on its own wouldn't ferment because it's just too sweet. It's been made for thousands of years. Even Aristotle discussed mead production, and it's slightly fallen out of favor over the last few centuries because beer and wine has become more and more popular, but it's still around, like you can see here. This is made from honey from northern France. It's a monofloral honey, so it's made from linden flower honey, and it's fermented in stainless steel at low temperatures. This is quite light in color, as you can see. It smells of honey, obviously. There's also a little bit of lavender coming through. It's quite floral and yeah, quite nice. But it really smells of honey and not of much more. On the palate, it's quite intense and sweet. There's 32 grams of residual sugar left in this wine. And it's called extra brut, which doesn't really make sense for me because extra brut means something else in wine entirely, but yeah, it's definitely not extra brut. It's not very dry. It's more quite sweet and round and rich. I don't know. I don't think this is really super exciting. I think this is well made. It tastes and smells of honey and it's quite sweet, and I guess that's what people would expect if they order or buy a bottle of this. But for me, there's just not much excitement there. I would rate this 81 points. It's good, it's well crafted, but it's not super interesting. So here we have another interesting one, and it looks like it's the first non-sparkling fruit wine. It's the Bodegas Platé Blanco Semiseco from the Canary Islands, and it retails for $12 US. Banana wine is apparently quite popular in Africa and Southeast Asia. Platano means banana, and that's why the winery is called this. And it's made from fruit sourced from local farmers. Bananas are then peeled and fermented for 4 weeks and then filtered and bottled. So let's open the cork. Before I open the bottle, I just noticed something interesting. This looks like it was corked with one of those handheld corking machines, not with a big industrial corking machine, which is kind of funny. I don't know. I mean, this is what my bottles look like after I cork them myself. So I don't really know how big the production here is, but apparently it's not huge. It really looks like a light white wine. It doesn't really give off any indication that it might be made from bananas. This is really interesting. I actually expect this to smell very intense of banana, but it actually smells more like a wine. It smells like a Chardonnay. Not a great Chardonnay maybe, but one that was made in a warm climate. Smells a little bit of orange, a little bit of lemon, but also has these banana flavors coming through. On the palate, it's actually also really rich and round. There's some freshness there. It's not super sweet. There is quite a bit of texture there as well. There's a little bit of saltiness coming through. So this is an interesting wine for sure. The question now is, do I rate this as a wine or as a banana wine? In a blind tasting, I would think this is maybe an average, pretty industrial white wine. But as I know that this is a banana wine, I think it's actually really good. I would rate this 86 points. I think it's very good, and it's quite surprising that you can make this out of bananas. The last one is the Frederiksdal Kirsebärvin Reserve, a cherry wine from Denmark, and it retails for $50. This project started in 2006. They only produce cherry wine, and they claim that they are the only winery in the world that produces cherry wine just like grape wine. So they actually do spontaneous fermentation and aging in barrels, and hopefully this is worth the money. They're using the Svensbær cherry, which is a sherry that you wouldn't necessarily eat because it's so tannic, but it's great for winemaking apparently. And the reserve wine is actually aged for at least 30 months in 225 liter barrels. This actually looks like a vintage port, really dark, pretty much opaque. You can't see anything through the wine. Wow, this is really rich. It smells of cherries obviously, but also of chocolate, of spices, a little bit of blackberries, cassis flavors coming through. So it's really concentrated, very complex and really interesting. On the palate, it's really rich and structured. It feels like you can almost eat this. There's quite a bit of tannic grip, quite a lot of sweetness, great freshness though, and it's very well balanced. So there's quite a bit of sweetness, but the acidity just kind of breaks up the sweetness, makes this wine a really interesting product. Fascinating stuff. I think this comes really close to a great sweet wine because of its intensity, complexity, also the structure. So there's really grip there. It doesn't just feel fruity and fresh, there's also a real bite to it. So a really good wine. I rate this 93 points. It's really good, and I can really see myself drinking this with the Stilton, for example, or with some braised meat. It just brings so much to the table. Okay, it's time for the wrap up. My 3 favorite wines were this, the Kirsebär wine, which is just delicious. The Saf, that was just something else. I really like this and I definitely have to try it again. And the Rhubarb wine. So looks like the Nordic countries win. They have produced all 3 of those wines, and all of them are really worth seeking out. But the tasting also showed that there is quite a lot going on in this category, and I should definitely taste more fruit wines in the future. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, then please like it down here. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is, have you ever tasted fruit wines? Let me know down below. Tell me which ones you liked, which ones you don't like. I hope I see you guys again soon. Until then, stay thirsty.